My name's Emily, and I'm 29. Christmas morning always felt like magic, our living room glowing with twinkling lights and the smell of pine. This year my heart raced as Mom and Dad handed my sister Clara a tiny velvet box. Inside, a house key. We bought her a house, they beamed, then turned to me. You'll understand someday. My smile froze, a knot tightening in my chest. Clara's eyes flickered toward me, uncertain. Have you ever felt pushed aside on a day meant for love? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Like and subscribe to share this journey with me. The living room felt smaller after the gifts were opened, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. I sat on the couch, clutching my mug, watching Clara twirl her new house key between her fingers. Mom was already sketching floor plans on a napkin, her voice bright as she asked Clara about paint colors. Dad nodded along, his eyes fixed on my sister like she was the only one in the room. I tried to join in, leaning forward. So where's this house? I asked, keeping my tone light. Mom barely glanced up. Oh, it's in that new development near the lake. Perfect for Clara's future. Her words landed like a pebble in my chest, sharp but subtle. I forced a nod, sipping my cocoa, the sweetness turning bitter on my tongue. I looked at my gift card, a generic blue plastic square Dad had handed me with a quick pat on the shoulder. We know you're fine, Emily, he'd said, like that was enough. Fine. The word echoed hollow. I'd spent weeks picking out their gifts, saving up from my assistant manager job at the bookstore. I'd wrapped Mom's scarf and Dad's leather journal with care, hoping they'd see me. But now, watching them fuss over Clara's big moment, I felt like a guest at my own family's Christmas. Ethan, my older brother, sat across from me, scrolling on his phone. I caught his eye, hoping for some kind of signal, maybe a shared glance to say he saw this too. He raised an eyebrow just for a second, then looked away. My stomach twisted. Even Ethan, who usually called out Mom and Dad's quirks, wasn't stepping in. I wanted to ask him why, but the words stuck. Instead, I stood mumbling about getting more coffee and slipped into the kitchen. The counter was cluttered with cookie trays and half-empty mugs. I leaned against it, staring at the fridge covered in old photos. There was one of me and Clara, maybe 7 and 5, in matching red dresses, grinning at a county fair. We looked equal, then both of us clinging to Dad's hands. I traced the edge of the photo, my throat tightening. When did that change? Was it when I moved out at 22, scraping by to prove I could make it? Or was it always there, hidden under holiday smiles? I heard Clara's laugh from the living room, sharp and bright, followed by her voice on the phone. Yeah, it's a whole house. Can you believe it? She said, probably to her boyfriend Jake. Each word felt like a needle, not because I didn't want her to be happy, but because it was so loud, so public. I pictured her posting about it already, the likes piling up, while I sat here with a gift card and a question no one would answer. The back door creaked open, and Aunt Helen bustled in, her arms full of Tupperware. Emily, there you are, she said, her cheeks flushed from the cold. I heard about Clara's house. Isn't it just incredible? Your parents must be so proud. She set the containers down, oblivious to the way my jaw tightened. I managed a smile, nodding as she went on about property values and starter homes. Her excitement was genuine, but it carved out a hollow space inside me. She didn't know, how could she? But standing there listening to her rave about Clara's gift, I felt like I was disappearing one kind word at a time. I poured more coffee, my hands shaky, and glanced back at the living room. Clara was showing Mom something on her phone, probably photos of the house. Dad was laughing, his deep chuckle filling the space. I wanted to walk back in to ask again, to make them explain why Clara's future was worth a house and mine was worth a pat on the back. But my feet stayed rooted heavy with a fear I couldn't name. What if they confirmed what I was starting to suspect, that I didn't matter as much? I gripped the coffee pot, my knuckles pale against the handle, and forced myself to breathe. Aunt Helen was still chattering about Clara's new house, her voice a cheerful hum that grated against my nerves. I nodded, half listening, and slipped back to the living room, hoping to blend into the noise. But the scene hadn't changed. Mom was now measuring Clara's finger for a new keychain, her laughter soft and warm, while Dad flipped through a real estate brochure, murmuring about upgrades. I stood in the doorway, invisible, my chest tight, with something I couldn't name yet. I slid back onto the couch, tucking my legs under me, and tried to focus on the Christmas lights blinking on the tree. Their glow felt mocking, like they were highlighting everyone else's joy but mine. Ethan was still on his phone, his thumb scrolling endlessly. I leaned toward him, lowering my voice. "Did you know about the house?" I asked, searching his face for some kind of ally. He glanced up, his jaw tight, and shrugged. "They mentioned something a while back. Didn't think it was a big deal." His words hit like a slap, casual but cutting. "Not a big deal," I swallowed hard, looking away, my fingers twisting the edge of my sweater. Clara hung up her call and bounced over, her smile wide. "Emily, you should come see the house tomorrow. It's got this cute porch." Her excitement was genuine, but it felt like she was rubbing salt in a wound she didn't even see. I forced a smile, my lips stiff. Maybe I said my voice thinner than I meant. She didn't notice, already turning back to Mom with a question about curtains. I felt a prickle behind my eyes, the kind that warns you tears are close, but I blinked it away. Not here. Not now. The front door opened, and my cousin Sophie swept in with a gust of cold air and a tray of homemade peppermint bark. She hugged everyone, her energy filling the room, and immediately joined the house talk. "Clara, you're basically a homeowner now," she said, laughing. "What's next? A picket fence?" Everyone chuckled, and I tried to laugh too, but it came out hollow. Sophie caught my eye and tilted her head. "You okay, Em?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I nodded too quickly. "Just tired," I lied, hating how small I sounded. She didn't push, but her frown lingered, like she saw something I wasn't ready to admit. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing air, needing space. The hallway was quiet, lined with framed photos of us as kids. I stopped at one from my high school graduation, my cap tilted, my smile wide. Dad's arm was around me, his grin proud. I'd worked 2 jobs that summer to save for college, and he'd called me his fighter. Now that memory felt like a lie. If I was their fighter, why was Clara the one they were lifting up? In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. My eyes were red-rimmed, my jaw set. I wanted to march back and demand answers. Why her? Why not me? But the thought of their faces, maybe pitying, maybe dismissive, stopped me cold. I dried my hands, my movements slow, and caught sight of my phone buzzing on the counter. A text from my coworker Lily popped up. "How's Christmas? You surviving family?" I stared at it, my thumb hovering. Lily had her own family drama, always joking about her mom favoring her brother. I typed back, barely, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to explain this ache, not yet. Back in the living room, the conversation had shifted to Clara's move-in plans. Dad was saying something about helping with the down payment, his voice steady, like it was the most natural thing. I sat down, my hands clasped tight in my lap, and felt the room tilt. A down payment. That kind of money didn't just appear. Where had it come from? A question started to form, sharp and dangerous, but I bit it back. Instead, I watched Mom hand Clara a folder of paperwork, their heads bent together, and felt a crack widen inside me. This wasn't just a gift. It was a choice. And I wasn't the one they chose. I woke up the next morning with a headache, the kind that sits behind your eyes and makes everything feel heavy. My apartment was quiet, the only sound the hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing outside. I reached for my phone, hoping for a distraction, but the first thing I saw was Clara's Instagram. A photo of her standing in front of a charming white house with a red door captioned, "My new chapter starts here." The likes were pouring and comments from friends gushing about her luck. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen. It wasn't just the house. It was how she flaunted it, like my silence didn't exist. I tossed the phone onto the couch and pulled my knees to my chest. The Christmas scene replayed in my mind. Not the warm parts, but the moments that cut Mom's dismissive wave, Dad's quick pat, Ethan's shrug. I'd gone home hoping for connection, but left feeling like a shadow. Now Clara's post felt like a billboard announcing my place in the family. Second, always second. I dragged myself to the kitchen, brewing coffee to shake the fog. My laptop sat open on the counter, emails from work blinking for attention. I'd gotten a promotion last month, assistant manager to regional coordinator at the bookstore chain. More responsibility, a small raise. I'd been proud texting Mom and Dad about it, but at Christmas they hadn't mentioned it once. Not a word. Meanwhile, Clara's house was their whole world. The unfairness burned a slow simmer, turning to a boil. I grabbed my coat and headed to the family dinner at my parents' house that evening, determined to act normal. The drive was short, the streets lined with holiday lights that now looked garish, overdone. When I walked in, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic hit me, comforting but out of place with the knot in my stomach. Clara was at the dining table showing Dad a paint swatch for her new living room. Mom was setting out plates, humming softly. Ethan was in the corner sipping a beer, his face unreadable. I took a seat, forcing a smile as Mom passed the mashed potatoes. The conversation flowed around Clara's house as expected. "We're thinking hardwood floors," Dad said, his eyes on Clara. "Really ties the place together." Clara nodded, scribbling notes on her phone. I stabbed at my chicken, my appetite gone. I wanted to say something about my promotion to make them see me, but the words felt stuck, like they'd come out wrong. After dessert, I helped Mom clear the table, hoping for a moment alone. In the kitchen, I stacked plates in the sink, the clink of porcelain loud in the quiet. "Mom," I started, keeping my voice steady, "why did you and Dad buy Clara a house? I mean, why her and not something for all of us?" She paused, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face softening in a way that made my skin prickle. "Emily, you're so strong," she said like it was a compliment. "You've always been fine on your own. Clara needs this to get started." Her words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. Strong, fine. They weren't praise. They were excuses. I gripped the counter, my nails digging into the wood. "So because I work hard, I get nothing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Mom's eyes widened, then softened again. "It's not like that, honey. We just made a choice." She turned back to the dishes like that settled it. I stood there, the room spinning. A choice. They chose Clara, her future, her dreams over mine. I wanted to scream, to shake her, and ask why my effort was invisible. Instead, I walked out, my hands trembling. In the living room, Ethan caught my eye. His beer paused halfway to his mouth. "You okay?" he mouthed. I shook my head, barely noticeable, and he leaned closer. "They've always babied her," he whispered, his voice low, bitter. "It's not just you." His words were a lifeline, but they also sharpened the truth. This wasn't new. It was a pattern, and I was caught in it. Ethan's whisper hung in the air, a bitter truth that made my chest ache. I wanted to grab onto his words, to demand he say more, but Clara's laugh cut through, pulling everyone's attention back to her. She was showing Mom a photo of her new kitchen, her voice bright with plans for a farmhouse sink. I sat back, my hands clenched in my lap, feeling the room shrink around me. The weight of Mom's words in the kitchen pressed harder now, her "you're strong" excuse twisting into something cruel. Strong meant alone. Strong meant forgotten. I slipped outside to the porch, needing air, the cold biting at my fingers. The street was dark, holiday lights flickering in neighbors' yards. I leaned against the railing, my breath visible in the chill, and tried to piece together when this divide started. Had I been too independent, too quick to say I was fine? Or had they always seen Clara as the one who needed saving? The questions churned, each one sharper than the last, but no answers came. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Lily, my coworker, texting a photo of her cat in a Santa hat with a message, "Spill the tea. How's family night?" I stared at the screen, her playfulness a stark contrast to the storm inside me. I wanted to tell her everything, to unload the hurt, but my fingers wouldn't type. Instead, I scrolled back to Clara's Instagram, her house post now at 200 likes. A comment from Sophie caught my eye. "So proud of you, Clara. This is huge." My throat tightened. No one was proud of me. Not tonight. The door creaked behind me, and Ethan stepped out, his beer bottle dangling from one hand. "You look like you're plotting a jailbreak," he said, his voice low but not unkind. I forced a small laugh, but it died quickly. "Just needed a second," I said, staring at the ground. He leaned beside me silent for a moment, then sighed. I should have said something at Christmas. I saw how they brushed you off. It's always been like this with her. His admission was a spark igniting something raw inside me. Then why didn't you? I asked, my voice sharp, surprising even me. He flinched, looking away. Didn't want to ruin the day, he muttered. His excuse stung another layer of betrayal. Even Ethan, who saw the truth, chose silence over standing up for me. I wrapped my arms around myself, the cold seeping deeper. I'm tired of being the one who's fine, I said, barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, but he didn't reply, and the silence between us grew heavy, filled with unspoken resentment. He went back inside, leaving me alone with the night. I stayed out there too long, my fingers numb, my thoughts spiraling. When I finally went back in, the dinner was winding down. Clara was helping Dad clear plates, their easy chatter, like a wall I couldn't breach. Mom caught my eye and smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give a stranger, polite and empty. I grabbed my coat, mumbling about an early morning, and headed for the door. No one stopped me. At home, I collapsed onto my couch, the apartment feeling emptier than ever. My eyes landed on a stack of mail on the coffee table, and beneath it a corner of an old letter peeked out. I pulled it free, recognizing Dad's handwriting. It was from years ago, after my first year of college, praising my grit for balancing work and school. "You're unstoppable, Emily," he'd written. I'd cherished those words, framing them in my mind as proof of his pride. Now they felt like a trap. Unstoppable meant I didn't need them. Unstoppable meant I could be ignored. I dropped the letter, my vision blurring. The hurt was no longer just about the house. It was every moment they'd chosen Clara, every time they'd assumed I'd be okay. I wanted to call them, to scream that I wasn't fine, that I needed them too. But the thought of their pity, or worse, their indifference, stopped me. Instead, I curled up the letter crumpled beside me and felt the crack in my heart widen, jagged and deep. New Year's Eve at my parents' house buzzed with forced cheer, the dining room crowded with candles and a glittery centerpiece. I'd spent days crafting a scrapbook for Dad, each page a memory of us, fishing trips, late-night talks, my first bike ride. I handed it to him during the gift exchange, my hands sweaty, hoping it would bridge the gap I felt widening. His eyes lit up as he unwrapped it, flipping through the first page with a soft chuckle. "This is something, Emily," he said, and for a moment I let myself hope. But then Clara passed him a bottle of wine, a thank you for the house, and his focus shifted. He set my scrapbook on the table, barely touched, and launched into a story about her new neighborhood. My stomach dropped, the room tilting. I gripped my glass of sparkling cider, the bubbles stinging my throat. Mom was nodding along, her smile wide, while Ethan picked at his napkin, avoiding my gaze. The chatter faded to a dull roar in my ears, replaced by a single thought: they don't see me. I tried to stay calm, to laugh at Clara's jokes about picking out furniture, but each word felt like a brick piling onto my chest. The candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across the table, and I noticed my scrapbook pushed aside now, under a stack of coasters. Something snapped, quiet but fierce. I set my glass down, the clink louder than I meant, and everyone turned. "Why is my effort never enough?" I asked, my voice low, trembling. The room went still, Forks pausing midair. Dad's brow furrowed, his mouth opening, but Mom spoke first. "Emily, don't make a scene," she said, her tone sharp, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. The words cut deeper than I expected, slicing through the hope I'd clung to. "A scene," I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "I spent weeks on that gift, and you can't even look at it. But Clara's house? That's all you care about." Clara's face flushed, her eyes darting to the floor. I didn't ask for this," she mumbled, but it barely registered. My focus was on Mom, who leaned back, her lips tight. "We did what was best for the family," she said, her voice calm but cold. "You've always been so capable, Emily. We knew you'd be okay. Capable." The word was a blade twisting in my gut. I wanted to scream that being capable didn't mean I didn't need them, that I wasn't unbreakable. Rachel, my childhood friend, was there sitting across from me. She'd come for the party, her presence a small comfort until now. Her eyes widened, flicking between me and my parents, and she reached out, touching my arm. "Em, maybe take a breath?" she whispered, her voice gentle but urgent. I pulled away, not wanting her pity. The room felt too small, the air too thick, and I stood my chair scraping against the floor. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to say something, anything to prove I was wrong. He rubbed his neck, his eyes on the table. "We made a tough call," he said finally, his voice low. "The house, it came from your college fund, Emily. We figured you'd already made it through school, so—" His words trailed off, but they hit like a freight train. My college fund. The one I'd stretched thin working nights at a diner to cover what it didn't. They'd taken it, given it to Clara, and assumed I'd just manage. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a rage I didn't know I could feel. I stared at the scrapbook, its cover peeking out from under the coasters, and saw every late night, every loan payment, every time I'd told myself I was enough. They'd stolen more than money, they'd stolen my trust. I opened my mouth, but no words came, only a raw, silent scream trapped in my throat. The silence in the dining room was suffocating every eye on me, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away from Dad's guilty face. My college fund. Those words clawed at me, ripping open years of pride I'd built on my own. I'd thought I'd earned their respect, but they'd just seen a safety net they could cut away. Clara shifted in her seat, her hands twisting together. "I didn't know," she said, her voice small, almost lost in the tension. "They never told me." Mom stood her chair creaking and stepped toward me. "Emily, you're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her tone sharp like she was scolding a teenager. "You graduated, didn't you? You have a good job. Clara needed a push and we gave it to her. Why can't you be happy for your sister?" Her words were a slap, public and stinging, painting me as selfish in front of everyone. Rachel gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth while Ethan's jaw tightened, his knuckles white around his glass. I felt the room's weight shift their gazes, judging, pitying, waiting for me to crumble. "Happy," I choked out, my voice cracking. "You took my future and handed it to her, and I'm supposed to smile." My hands shook and I pressed them against the table to steady myself. Dad cleared his throat, trying to speak, but Mom cut him off. "We didn't take anything," she snapped. "You were always going to be fine." Clara wasn't. That's the truth. The truth. It hit like a blade, slicing through every memory of family dinners, every time I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace. I looked at Clara, her eyes wide, tears brimming, but she said nothing more. She didn't defend me, didn't stand up. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, shaking. "This is messed up, Mom. You can't just rewrite Emily's life to fix Clara's." His words were a spark, but Mom's glare shut him down. "Stay out of it, Ethan," she said, and he slumped back, defeated. Rachel reached for me again, her voice urgent. "Em, let's go outside," she whispered, but I shook my head, rooted to the spot. The candles on the table flickered their light, catching the centerpiece's glitter, and it felt like the room was mocking me, all sparkle and no substance. I saw Aunt Helen in the corner, her face pale, her usual chatter gone. Even she, who'd gushed about Clara's house, looked shaken, but she didn't speak. No one did. Mom folded her arms, her expression hard. "You're making everyone uncomfortable, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "This is New Year's. Can't you let it go? Let it go." The phrase echoed a final twist of the knife. My whole life I'd let things go missed, birthdays, forgotten promises, the quiet assumption I'd always be okay. But this was my foundation, the money I'd counted on, the trust I'd held sacred, and they'd torn it apart without a second thought. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them feel the hole they'd carved in me. But my body wouldn't move. My voice wouldn't come. The room spun, the faces blurring Clara's guilt, Ethan's anger, Mom's defiance, Dad's avoidance. My heart pounded, each beat a reminder of what I'd lost, not just money, but the family I thought I had. I stood there exposed, raw, with nowhere to hide and no one to catch me. The drive home from New Year's Eve was a blur, the city lights smearing through my windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel, still shaking from Mom's words, Dad's confession, Clara's silence. My college fund gone, handed to Clara like it was nothing. I got to my apartment and collapsed onto the bed, the darkness swallowing me. But as the hours ticked by, something shifted. The hurt was still there, raw and jagged, but beneath it, a spark of resolve flickered. I couldn't keep swallowing this. I had to act. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, a notebook open, my coffee cold. I started writing a letter to Mom and Dad, not to scream, but to lay out every piece of my pain. My pen scratched the paper words, spilling out the years of feeling invisible, the sting of their choice, the betrayal of my trust. I deserved better. I wrote, my hand steady. I need you to see me. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that felt like a start. I sealed the letter, my heart pounding, and set it aside. Writing it wasn't enough. I needed to face them. But first I wanted to talk to Clara, to understand her side, to see if she'd stand with me. I texted her asking to meet at a coffee shop near my place. She replied quickly, "Sure, tomorrow," and I felt a flicker of hope mixed with dread. What if she defended them? What if she didn't care? At work that day, I was distracted shelving books with mechanical movements. Lily. My coworker noticed her usual grin fading. "You look like you're carrying the world," she said, leaning against a display. I hesitated, then told her everything: the house, the fund, the fight. Her eyes widened and she hugged me quick and fierce. "That's not okay, Em. You should talk to someone like a therapist. It helped me with my family mess." Her words stuck, a seed planted. That night I Googled therapists, my laptop screen glowing in the dim room. I found Dr. Susan, a woman with kind eyes and a profile about healing family wounds. I booked a session for next week, my finger hovering over the submit button before I clicked. It felt like a leap, admitting I needed help, but also like a door cracking open. I wasn't just fighting for fairness, I was fighting for myself. The next day, I met Clara at the coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of espresso and cinnamon. She was already there, her hands wrapped around a mug, her face pale. I sat across from her, my stomach twisting. "Clara," I started, my voice low, "I need to know why you're okay with this. They took my fund for your house. Did you know?" She looked down, her fingers tightening on the mug. "I didn't, Em. Not until New Year's. I thought they just had the money." Her admission softened me, but not enough to let it go. "Then why didn't you say something?" I asked, leaning forward. "You saw how they shut me down." Clara's eyes met mine, glossy with tears. "I was scared," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose their support." Her honesty hit hard, a mirror to my own fear of rocking the boat. But I pressed on. "I'm telling them how I feel," I said. "Will you back me up?" She nodded, hesitant but firm. "I'll try." I left the coffee shop with a fragile sense of alliance, Clara's promise a thin thread to hold on to. Back home, I picked up the letter again, rereading it. Each word felt like a brick in a wall I was building, not to shut them out, but to define my space. I wasn't just their capable daughter anymore. I was Emily, and I was done being invisible. The thought of mailing it, of facing them, made my heart race, but it also made me feel alive, like I was finally stepping into my own light. Clara's promise to try lingered in my mind, fragile but real, as I walked back to my apartment. The winter air was sharp, stinging my cheeks, but I felt a clarity I hadn't in weeks. I wasn't just asking for fairness anymore. I was claiming my voice. That night I sat on my couch, the letter to my parents in one hand, a pen in the other. I added a final line: "I'm not asking for your guilt. I'm asking for your respect." My hand trembled as I folded it, sealing it in an envelope. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about being seen. The next day, I dropped the letter in the mailbox, my heart thudding as it slipped from my fingers. It was done. No turning back. But I knew words alone wouldn't shift years of their choices. I needed to build something for myself, something they couldn't ignore. At work, I pulled Lily aside during a quiet moment at the bookstore. "I'm thinking of asking for a raise," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes lit up. "Do it, Em. You've earned it." She offered to help me prep, and we spent our lunch break drafting a pitch listing my new role's impact and my extra hours. That evening, I met Ethan at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and endless coffee refills. He looked tired. His shoulders slumped, but he listened as I told him about the letter and my talk with Clara. "I'm done being the one who's fine," I said, stirring my coffee. "I want us to call a family meeting. Lay it all out." Ethan leaned back, his brow furrowed. "They'll push back," he warned, but his eyes held a spark of agreement. "I'm in," he said finally. "Let's do it." His support, quiet but firm, felt like a tether pulling me forward. My first therapy session with Dr. Susan came a few days later. Her office was warm with a soft rug and a shelf of worn books. I sat across from her. My hands knotted and poured out the story. The house, the fund, the years of feeling sidelined. She listened, her gaze steady, and asked, "What do you want from this, Emily? Not from them, but for you." The question caught me off guard like a light cutting through fog. I fumbled for an answer, then said, "To feel like I matter." Saying it aloud cracked something open, a truth I'd buried under duty and silence. Dr. Susan suggested I start small to anchor myself. That night I dug out a corkboard from my closet and pinned up a photo of a cozy house I'd saved from a magazine years ago. I added a sticky note with my home scrawled in marker, then another with "Raise and Family Meeting." It was a vision board, simple, but mine a map of what I was fighting for. Each pin felt like a stitch mending the pieces of me they'd unraveled. The weekend came and I prepared for the meeting with Ethan. We sat at my kitchen table mapping out what to say. "We don't accuse," I said, tapping my pen. "We explain how it feels." Ethan nodded, jotting notes. "I'll back you up, but they're stubborn," he said. "Dad especially." I pictured Dad's face, his avoidance on New Year's, and felt a pang. But I also saw Clara's tearful nod at the coffee shop, her promise to try. Maybe she'd show up for me too. As I cleaned up after Ethan left, I found myself humming a soft tune from childhood. The apartment felt less empty, the walls holding my plans, my courage. I stood in front of my vision board, my eyes tracing the photo of that house. It wasn't just a dream, it was a promise to myself. I turned off the light, the room falling quiet, and stood there a moment longer, my silhouette steady against the glow of the street lamp outside. I wasn't invisible anymore. The family meeting was set for a Sunday afternoon, and I arrived at my parents' house with Ethan, my stomach knotted, but my resolve firm. The living room smelled of fresh laundry and lemon polish, the same as always, but the air felt heavier, charged. Mom and Dad sat on the couch, Clara beside them, her hands folded tightly. I took a chair across from them, Ethan at my side, and set my letter on the coffee table, its edges worn from my nervous grip. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "About the house, the fund, and how it's made me feel." Mom's face tightened, her lips a thin line, but Dad nodded, his eyes on the letter. I started explaining the years of feeling overlooked, the shock of learning my college fund was gone. My words were measured, practiced from therapy, but each one carried the weight of a decade's silence. Clara looked down, her fingers twisting a bracelet, while Ethan shifted, ready to jump in. Dad spoke first, his voice low. "We're sorry, Emily. We didn't mean to hurt you." His apology was soft, almost fragile, but it landed incomplete, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Mom's eyes darted to him, then back to me. "We can't undo the house," she said, her tone clipped. "It's done." Her words stung, not for their truth, but for their finality, like my pain was a problem they couldn't fix. Clara cleared her throat, her voice shaky. "I've been thinking," she said, glancing at our parents. "I could pay rent to you guys, maybe free up some money for Emily, for a down payment or something." Her offer hung in the air, a spark of fairness I hadn't expected. My chest loosened just a fraction, but Mom's frown deepened. "That's not practical, Clara," she said, dismissing it. Clara's shoulders slumped, and I saw her retreat, the fight draining from her eyes. Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharp. "It's practical if you make it work," he said. "You owe her that much." Dad raised a hand, his expression weary. "Let's not turn this into a fight," he said, but his avoidance felt like another wall. I sat back, my hands clasped, feeling the room's tension coil tighter. Their apology was real but shallow, their resistance louder than their regret. At work the next day, I met with my boss Mark to pitch my raise. My palms were sweaty, but I walked him through my contributions, streamlining inventory training, new staff, boosting sales. He listened, nodding, and said, "I'll take it to HR. You've made a strong case." His words were a small victory, a crack of light in the haze. I left his office standing taller, my vision board's raise note flashing in my mind. Back home, I checked my email, half hoping for a message from my parents. Nothing. Instead, a text from Clara popped up. "I'm sorry. Mom shut me down. I meant it about the rent." Her words were a lifeline, but they also sharpened the truth our parents weren't ready to change. I stared at the ceiling, the apartment's quiet pressing in, and felt a strange stillness settle over me. My actions had stirred something, but the outcome wasn't mine to control. Their half-steps and hesitations left me suspended, caught between hope and the ache of what might never come. Clara's text stayed unanswered on my phone, its words glowing in the dark as I lay awake. Her offer to pay rent was a gesture I hadn't expected, but Mom's quick dismissal replayed in my head, a door slammed shut. I wanted to believe Clara meant it, but the silence from my parents since the meeting spoke louder. No calls, no texts, just a void where I'd hoped for something more. I rolled over the bedsheets, cool against my skin, and felt the weight of their half-hearted apology settle deeper. The next week I threw myself into work, the bookstore's rhythm a distraction. Mark called me into his office, his face lit with a rare smile. "HR approved your raise," he said, sliding a new contract across his desk. "Starts next month." I exhaled, a knot loosening in my chest. It wasn't just the money. It was proof I could build something without them. I thanked him, my voice steady, and left with a quiet pride, picturing another sticky note for my vision board. Done. Ethan texted me that evening, suggesting we grab pizza to debrief. At the restaurant, the hum of conversation and clinking glasses felt like a shield. He slid a slice onto my plate, his eyes searching. "Any word from Mom and Dad?" he asked. I shook my head, cutting into my food. "Nothing." "You," he sighed, leaning back. "Dad called, but it was about my car payment." "Didn't mention you." His honesty stung, a fresh reminder of their selective attention. We ate in silence for a moment, the neon sign outside casting red light across his face. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder at the meeting," he said, his voice low. "I should have." I met his gaze, seeing guilt there, but also something new, solidarity. "You're here now," I said, and meant it. We planned to keep meeting, just us, to rebuild what the family's choices had cracked. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start, a thread to hold on to. At home, I stepped onto my balcony, the spring air soft with the scent of blooming jasmine. I'd planted a small herb garden in pots, basil and thyme, their leaves fragile but growing. I watered them, my fingers brushing the soil, and thought of Clara's house, its sturdy walls funded by my loss. Her boyfriend Jake had texted me out of the blue, his message awkward but blunt. "Clara's torn up about this. She wants to help, but I think it's unfair to her." His words twisted in me, not for their meaning, but for what they revealed. Clara's offer was real, but tangled in her own fears, her own life. I sat on the balcony, the city's hum distant below, and checked my phone again. Still nothing from my parents. I pictured Mom at her kitchen table, maybe reading my letter again, maybe setting it aside. Dad, too, probably tinkering in the garage, avoiding the truth. Their silence wasn't anger. It was worse, indifference, or maybe shame they couldn't face. I'd stirred the water, but the ripples hadn't reached them, not yet. The herbs glistened under the moonlight, their green tips bending slightly. I touched a basil leaf, its texture soft, and felt a hollowness creep in. My raise, Ethan's support, Clara's guilt. They were steps, but they didn't fill the space my parents' choices had carved out. I'd fought to be seen, but their quiet refusal to fully meet me left a bruise that pulsed with every breath. I stood, the night air cool on my face, and let the stillness hold me heavy and unbroken. Summer arrived soft and golden, the kind of warmth that makes you want to linger outside. I stood in my apartment's tiny backyard, stringing fairy lights across the fence for a small barbecue I'd planned. The idea had come to me after therapy, a way to gather the people who'd stood by me: Clara, Ethan, Rachel, and mark a new season. My hands worked steadily, looping the lights, but my mind wandered, sifting through the months since that raw New Year's Eve. I wasn't the same Emily anymore, not quite. The table was set with mismatched plates and a pitcher of lemonade, the air thick with the smell of charcoal. I'd invited Clara first, half expecting her to decline, but she'd said yes, her voice eager over the phone. Ethan was bringing his famous potato salad, and Rachel promised her playlists. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a moment to breathe, to rebuild on my terms. When they arrived, the backyard felt alive, laughter mingling with the sizzle of burgers on the grill. Clara helped me flip patties, her apron smudged with sauce, and for the first time in months we moved easily together like sisters again. She caught my eye, smiling softly. "This is nice, Em," she said, and I nodded, a warmth spreading in my chest. Ethan was teasing Rachel about her music, his voice loud over the speakers, and I watched them, my heart full but quiet like a lake after a storm. Later, as the sun dipped low, I slipped inside to grab more napkins. The apartment was cool, the hum of the fridge a steady pulse. I paused at my vision board, now crowded with new notes: Savings Goal Book Club, Lead Therapy Week 12. Each one was a choice, a step toward the life I wanted, not the one my parents had assumed I'd take. I traced the edge of the house photo, its corners curling, and felt a shift. That dream wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about building for me. Back outside, Clara pulled me aside, her hands fidgeting. "I've been thinking about what you said in therapy," she said, her voice low. "About needing to feel like you matter. I get it now. Mom and Dad, they put so much on me to be their success story." Her words were a revelation, peeling back her own pressure, her own cage. I listened, my arms crossed, and saw her not as the favored one, but as someone carrying her own weight. "It's not fair to either of us," I said, and she nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. We rejoined the others, the fairy lights glowing against the dusk. Rachel was telling a story about her latest dating disaster, her hands waving, and Ethan laughed loud and free. I sat back, sipping lemonade, the tartness sharp on my tongue. This moment, small as it was, felt like mine. I'd built it not to erase the past, but to hold space for something new. The hurt still lingered, a faint echo, but it didn't own me anymore. I leaned back, the chair creaking, and let the evening settle around me, soft and still. The barbecue wound down, the fairy lights casting a gentle glow as fireflies blinked in the yard. Rachel and Ethan were stacking plates, their voices a soft murmur, while Clara sat beside me, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm, and I felt a stillness in me, not perfect but real. I looked at my sister, her face softened by the light, and realized we were both untangling our own threads from our parents' expectations. I stood to clear the table, but paused by the fence where a small daisy had sprouted among the weeds. It was stubborn, blooming despite the odds, and I knelt to touch its petals, their texture delicate against my fingertips. In therapy, Dr. Susan had asked me to name what I could control. This flower, this night, this choice to gather my people, it was mine. The thought anchored me, a quiet strength that didn't need to shout. Rachel joined me, her sandals scuffing the grass. "You seem different," she said, her voice curious but warm. "Lighter, maybe?" I smiled, not trusting words to capture it. She'd seen me at my lowest that New Year's Eve when I'd unraveled, and now her words felt like a mirror showing me a woman who'd grown. Not healed, not fully, but steady enough to stand here hosting a night that wasn't about proving anything. Inside, I found an old journal on my bookshelf, its pages yellowed from years untouched. I flipped to a random entry written at 20, full of dreams about making my parents proud. "I'll show them I'm enough." I'd scrawled, the ink smudged from my grip. I read it now, my chest tight, but not with pain, just recognition. That girl had fought so hard to be seen, but she hadn't known her worth wasn't theirs to give. I closed the journal, setting it back gently, like laying a memory to rest. Clara came in her apron, off her expression hesitant. "I'm saving up," she said, almost a whisper. "For you, like I said. It's slow, but I want to." Her offer renewed wasn't about the money, it was her way of meeting me halfway. I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you," I said, and meant it not for the promise but for her effort to see me. We stood there, the hum of crickets outside filling the silence, and I felt a bridge forming, fragile but growing. Ethan poked his head in, breaking the moment. "You two okay?" he asked, his grin easy. I laughed, a sound that surprised me with its lightness. "Better than okay," I said, and he joined us, slinging an arm around Clara. The three of us talked about nothing and everything, work, music, plans for a fall hike. It wasn't the family I'd once imagined, but it was the one I was choosing piece by piece. As they left, I stood at my door, the night air cool against my skin. The daisy by the fence caught my eye again, its white petals faint in the dark. I didn't need to pick, it didn't need to keep it. It was enough to know it was there, thriving in its small corner. I closed the door, the click soft but final, and let the quiet wrap around me, a piece I'd carved out, steady and mine. Autumn swept in, painting the trees outside my apartment in shades of amber and rust. I stood at my window, a mug of tea warming my hands, watching leaves drift to the ground. The past year had been a storm, but now in this quiet moment, I felt a steadiness I hadn't known I could claim. My name's Emily, till 29, but not the same woman who stood trembling on New Year's Eve. I'd built something new, not perfect, but mine, and that was enough to start. I'd started a new routine, waking early to walk through the park near my place. The paths were lined with oaks, their branches heavy with color, and I'd listen to the crunch of gravel under my shoes, letting my thoughts settle. Those walks were my sanctuary, a place to untangle the hurt without rushing to fix it. I'd think about Mom and Dad, how their silence after the family meeting had faded into small gestures. Dad texting about my job, Mom asking about my weekend. They weren't apologies, not fully, but they were steps, and I'd learned to take them without expecting more. Work had become a haven too. The raise Mark secured for me meant I could save my bank account, slowly growing toward a down payment. I'd pinned a new photo to my vision board, a modest brick house with a wide porch, not a dream, but a goal. At the bookstore, I'd taken on leading a monthly book club, suggesting titles that sparked debates about family and forgiveness. The regulars, a mix of retirees and college kids, became a kind of community, their stories reminding me I wasn't alone in navigating messy ties. Clara and I were finding our way too. We'd started meeting for lunch every few weeks, splitting sandwiches at a deli with checkered tablecloths. She'd talk about her job, her plans to decorate her house, and I'd share my savings milestones. Our conversations weren't heavy, but they were honest, each one a brick in a bridge we were rebuilding. She'd saved a small amount for me, true to her word, and though I hadn't decided how to use it, her effort mattered more than the sum. Ethan had become a constant, our sibling meetups now a standing date. We'd grab coffee or hike the trails outside town, talking about everything but our parents at first, then slowly letting those wounds air. He'd apologized again for his silence, and I'd forgiven him, not because it was easy, but because holding on to resentment felt like carrying a weight I didn't need. We were allies now, not just siblings, and that shift felt like a gift I hadn't expected. I set my tea down, the steam curling in the morning light, and opened my laptop. I'd started writing again, not letters to my parents, but notes to myself, fragments of who I was becoming. One entry read, "You don't need their validation to be whole." It was simple, almost too plain, but it anchored me. I'd spent so long chasing their approval, measuring my worth by their choices, but now I was learning to measure it by my own. The park called me and I laced up my sneakers, stepping into the crisp air. The leaves were falling faster now, blanketing the path, and I walked slowly, my breath visible. Each step felt like a choice, not to forget the pain, but to live beyond it. The hurt was still there, a quiet scar, but it no longer defined the shape of my days. I paused by a bench, the wood worn smooth, and sat tilting my face to the sky, letting the moment hold me gentle and sure. I joined my family for a dinner in late October, the first since our tense meeting months ago. The dining room was warm, lit by soft lamps, the table set with Mom's old china. I sat across from Clara Ethan to my left and felt a cautious ease settle in. Dad asked about my book club, his voice genuine, and I answered describing a heated discussion about second chances. Mom listened, her usual quick comments absent, and nodded as I spoke. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, just a shift like a river finding a new path. Clara shared her own news, a promotion at her job, and I clapped my smile real. Later she pulled me aside, her voice low. "I'm still saving for you," she said, her eyes steady. "It's not much yet, but it's yours." I hugged her, the gesture small but heavy with trust rebuilt. Ethan caught my eye, raising his glass in a silent toast, and I knew we'd carved out something new, a family not defined by old wounds. At home that night, I lit a candle, its flames steady in the dark. I opened a blank notebook, not for plans, but for a letter to the Emily I'd been the one who'd stood silent too long. "You were enough always," I wrote, my pen slow. "Your strength wasn't a burden, it was your light." The words felt like a release, a promise to carry forward without the weight of others' choices. I closed the book, the candle's glow soft on my hands, and exhaled long and quiet. My life now was simple, but full walks in the park, book club debates, lunches with Clara, hikes with Ethan. I'd saved enough to start house hunting, touring small places with creaky floors and sunny kitchens. Each one felt like a step, not toward proving myself, but toward a home that was mine. Therapy with Dr. Susan had ended, but her question lingered. "What do you want for you?" I wanted peace, not as an end, but as a way to live, to let joy and pain coexist without breaking me. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was this: my worth wasn't tied to what others gave or took. It was in the choices I made, the boundaries I set, the love I offered despite the hurt. I'd spent years believing I needed my parents' approval to feel whole, but wholeness was mine to build piece by quiet piece. It's a truth I think we all chase, finding ourselves not in others' eyes, but in our own steady gaze. What moment made you realize your own worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments to know what shaped you. If this journey resonated, please like and subscribe to join me for more. Share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to growing, and to finding your light.